Hey, what's going on, class? It's Shantae Franklin, Strategy Project, Phase 4, Access, and Present. So, here we go. LEIS 536. So, where is it? There we go. So, what we're doing here is we're going to use FedEx, the Global Security Department, which is our legal department, and we're pretty much all over. And why it's global pretty much is we pretty have a run of all of FedEx. Anywhere there's a FedEx from ground, express, freight, we can get involved if it's investigations or just our regular security. So and there's functions in security. You have investigators, and you have officers like myself, and then you go to our contract officers. So when I went, I used to be at the LAX hub, and I called the managers there and I spoke with them because I was trying to figure out something, some type of disruptor or conflict. And I asked pretty much, how are things going there? If you want to know, yeah, those are the cool cars that we use right there. And now we got the SUVs, but we're waiting to get them here. So issues with security. So when I talked to the managers, and we got the corporate security staff, I pretty much, like I told you before, we have corporate security, we have our, and when you hear me say AUS, that's going to be our Allied Universal Security Contract Officers, and corporate is going to be what we do. We're actually FedEx employees. And it says that they're having a lot of issues on the graveyard shift. So I was on graveyard, and they told me that the contract officers and the corporate officers were butting heads a lot. There was a lot of issues between them. They couldn't get things right, and there was a lot of toxic attitudes, and there was something going on. Like, well, where's it coming from? So with that, I start speaking with other corporate officers and AUS officers, and they kind of blamed each other. But one thing that all came down to it was a sergeant, well, ex-sergeant for the AUS officers, which his name is Larry. And pretty much he was in charge, and he brought a lot of his people from another job. So you think about it, he worked at a casino, he brought a lot of his people over and got them hired at the LAX ramp. And they have that dedication to each other. So he has a very toxic attitude when it comes towards corporate. He, I keep touching this thing, is very sensitive, I apologize. He inspires separation, which means he tells his guys right away, you're not corporate, we're contract. You don't trust those guys. You don't trust corporate, they'll have you fired. So he put that confrontation in there. And then he also has his staff belittle corporate. If you say, hey, we're gonna go over here and do some work, oh, what are you doing? They're not doing anything. So there's a lot of belittling when it comes to the two different factions with corporate and AUS. Now remember, it's kind of odd because what a lot of people are missing is that AUS, they work for us. And it's easy to go there and start really trying to chop at them, but the thing with that is they're people, we're people. That's not the way leadership works. You have to find a way to try and salvage what you can, and you have a lot of good people. And if they have one person that's being toxic, there's a few ways you deal with that. Can you figure out why and get to the root of it, or does that person have to be eliminated? And I wish I could go back to the reading now where he talked about one of the CEOs who stood up, and I think it was in the Sandy book, and they said right off the bat, look, I barely learned to trust my husband, so I'm not trusting any of you. And then that's where she had that toxic attitude with everyone and no one wanted to deal with it. So then we're going to go into why. we're looking at Larry. What happened with Larry? And then, so we're going to go in a Harvard Business Review, the annual key, why we fight at work. 2 explanations she gives in hers that kind of fit the mold for Larry. And it says she gives the two explanations she gives. One is insecurity, and the other desire for power and control. So Larry was a sergeant. He demoted down so he can work day shift. Day shift did not take his toxic attitude, so he came back to graveyard. When he came back to graveyard, he couldn't get his sergeant position back. So now, where he used to run his shift and run his people, now he's a regular AUS officer who goes out the post and do what they do. And he's not running the whole shift anymore. His voice isn't as strong, even though it's still loud. And then you want to go to insecurity. Insecurity was Larry applied for corporate. He wanted to become a corporate officer. There was a point in time where they were going to accept someone from outside of FedEx to come in, and so a lot of the AUS officers put their applications through. He pretty much was told, you're not getting it. There's things about you that's just not going to fit the mold as a corporate officer. So right there, you're going to have issues with how he's going to go and get along. Again, he applied for corporate security, he was denied. He used to work as a sergeant, went down, he came back, and so now we have this headbutt all the time. And he needs to find a way to feel important, valid, and the way you do that is you belittle those where you couldn't get, and you can't get back to where you are. So now to get his validation, we have a bunch of toxic attitudes, and that's spreading out. So, some of the strategies. When you got into phase 2, my eyes opened to different ways to approach the situation to stop the hostilities between the two groups. FedEx has written policy about talking negative about coworkers. They have a policy where if you talk negative about coworkers, you can actually be terminated. So if you're spreading a bunch of rumors or you're putting negative vibes out there regarding if it's management or even someone on your level, you can grab a termination letter, or you can just go ahead and get in a lot of trouble if it's not demoted or anything else. So the best thing to do was having a meeting and explaining the two groups, the difference between the job functions we have. So we set up a meeting with FedEx employees, the other corporate officers, and security managers to discuss the seriousness of Larry's behavior. Okay, so pretty much during the meeting, you came into McKee's 3-step process to interrupt the vicious cycle. The first step is to become, and it's lower than I didn't like, become more aware of your feelings and reactions to the pressure of stress. The second step, which you can't see, and I don't know why this is coming up, which I'm not going to, I only remember the second step, but I do remember the third is getting in touch with your feelings, and also the second is getting in touch with your feelings. And then the third is to look at the person who you might have the issue with as a person, as a human, not as an enemy. So right there is where you want to understand that Larry's a person. He's dealing with things. He's not at the position he was. He can't get a different position. So now we got to figure out how do we give him some type of validation without having to terminate him. And part of being a great leader is working your way around that. You bring other leaders, you bring other people to a leadership role, to a leadership thought and mind and process. So now we have to work on Larry to save him, because FedEx will let people go quite quick, as a tongue twister, quite quick. And especially if you're not a FedEx employee, because it's just as easy as saying we don't want you back at the site. We don't want that for him. We don't want that for a lot of the AUS officers. They're good employees. They're just being fed things that they don't need at the time. So we have to bring Larry in as a person and understand he just has some issues and how we're going to deal with those issues. So with that, it did come off as a bit rough in a way where we ended up writing to management and trying to figure out how we could do this without certain managers getting involved, because certain managers would just say, hey, let's get him out of there, get a new person in here, and that's going to show everyone that we're not here for a lot of the long talk and bad talk about our company when we're paying them. And I already know exactly which managers are going to say that. So it's best to try and get the right people involved to fix the problem. So when the more, I guess you want to say, not so lenient managers get involved, there'll already be a game plan. So now we have to get a game plan. And it pretty much is going to come down to policy and looking at how leniency on how the managers will flex when it comes to the contract work. So aware of how we feel. When we're in this meeting, a lot of my coworkers pretty much just wanted Larry gone. I'm pretty sure that almost every coworker in the room just said it would be better for him to leave. And just want to make sure, well, are you upset with him because he's being toxic? Or are you upset with him because you feel threatened? Where are you coming from when you're just feeling like the first thing to do is for him to leave? And I explained to him, I know he has issues, and that's only because I've done more reading with that. He has these issues, but he still needs to take care of his family. He's still a part of our family. There are times he's been there to back us up. We've been there to back him up. So do you just throw someone out that fast? Or can we work together to find some type of peace so we can get the two teams back together? And I gave a great example. It was like we worked swing shift. Swing shift was a family between contract and between corporate. Lunches together, speak together, they can count on each other, they can go to each other about private issues and understand that it's not going to be spread everywhere. And they work together as a team from the time they get to the shift, from the time they leave the shift. How can we instill that on graveyard? That's something you do. You just don't find the first and fast, easiest way to get it done when you can make it a better way. So getting there is not to get all the stress and pressure just because he's talking, and that's pretty much what he's doing. So the outcome, pretty much, it came to, let me see, two things. Management had a meeting, so we did that. So the management had a meeting with the AUS admin. We pretty much knew from the get that we were not going to be privileged to exactly what was said in that meeting, but our management did have a talk with them to let them know that we're trying to come up with a game plan because of all the issues that we were dealing with with Graveyard between the two factions from contract and corporate. So they did what they did, and somehow, some way, it didn't come up where anyone needed to be terminated or removed from the account. But what did come down was, and this actually, I don't know how it jumped a few managers, and it came down to a directive. Corporate and contract no longer work together. Contract officers have their job functions, which is they're posted. They post at places, they sit at gates, and they check people in and check people out. And that's what they're trained to do. Corporate are there if contract calls them for some type of support, dealing with hostile employees or some type of policy issue, or people coming from contract workers coming on that we have to deal with. And that's what corporate does. If there are reports to be written, if we have to go to court, things that we do, and that came from the MD, which shot over everyone, which we were surprised about, because he came and said, okay, they get posted and call us. The contract officer now put in a position to understand that they work for the company. He came in and actually had a meeting, 2 separate meetings. He put us in our place, and then he put them in their place. And that was coming regardless if we have these issues, and I don't even know if he even found out about these issues. When I say he, meaning the managing director, he found out about the issues, and he said, you guys do this, and he actually told us in the point blank, I have a lot of corporate officers, I don't need you all, so make sure you're doing what you need to do, because when you're gone, you're gone. He with the contract and said, I don't pay my corporate officers to do the jobs that you guys do. It was very direct, and that was it. And I got called. And so it doesn't want to stop. Okay, so he came back in and he straight up put it out there. I don't pay them to sit at post. I don't pay them to deal with things like that. I pay my contract officers for that. They get paid that. My corporate officers deal with corporate issues, FedEx issues, and they support you guys, but they are also someone that you call on when you need them. So from there, it was very hard for Larry to keep the separation because it happened automatically. Now we don't even work together. We still deal with each other. We go through this and that and see them and they see us, but it's two total different work platforms now. We're on ours, they're on theirs. Did Larry learn anything from this? I'm not sure. They had a meeting about him, and maybe that's where it came from. Maybe our managing director got it from his own admin. I'm not sure. We're not privileged to that. They already let us know any type of disciplinary action that Larry went through is his business, his company's business. And when I said one thing about FedEx, they want to make sure that, let me just check one more thing real quick. FedEx looks out for FedEx. They let us know we do not discipline contract workers because then that makes them FedEx employees. So I'm not sure how they separated that with their company, but they put it on their company to deal with. And a lot of the toxic levels are down now, but we also don't work together. But all of the bickering and going back and forth is totally gone, and it's a lot more peaceful on the shift. So if there are any questions, you guys feel free to leave me a message at the bottom of the post. And again, one important thing that we all should take into account, that companies are going to protect themselves financially before they worry about any employee's feelings. So when the MD came in here, he made that clear. He does not care about our feelings. This is what you do and this is what you do. So thank you guys a lot. And if you need to, I have all my references from the places that I went to during my presentation. And I did a lot in the Harvard Business Review, which is HBR. So that's where I went to for most of it. So thank you guys again, and I'll see your comments. All right.